Let's look at the value and benefits of regenerative grazing. So we're going to see, I have an article to share with you. We're going to see that regenerative grazing compares favorably to the other two main competitors for land use in agriculture, annual row crops and concentrated animal feeding operations. It compares favorably in the realm of climate change and carbon sequestration because regenerative grazing stores more carbon than these alternatives. It compares favorably in the realm of flood control because regenerative grazing is good for the land. It controls floods. It also prevents droughts because you have more water being stored in the soil, and it reverses desertification. Desertification is happening everywhere almost. At least land degradation is happening everywhere. Regenerative grazing can help reverse that. Regenerative grazing compares favorably to the main alternatives in the realm of soil health, erosion control, and nutrient cycling. You're going to have healthier soil, you can have less erosion, and the nutrients like carbon and nitrogen are going to be cycling properly instead of being extracted and then piled on. Like, let's pile on some nitrogen and then so regenerative grazing compares favorably in the realm of wildlife habitat and biological diversity. Biological diversity in the soil, biological diversity in the plant matter, biological diversity in the aquatic ecosystems, in the forest ecosystems, in the grassland ecosystems. Regenerative grazing compares favorably in the realm of animal welfare. Certainly regenerative grazing, if I'm a cow, I'd rather live in a regenerative grazing situation than a concentrated animal feeding operation. Compares favorably in the realm of the nutritional value of the foods and local food, the ability to have a local food economy. And it compares favorably in the realm of you're going to have stronger local economies. So we're looking at an article. The lead author is Elizabeth Spratt, and it's entitled Accelerating Regenerative Grazing to Tackle Farm, Environmental, and Societal Challenges in the Upper Midwest. So here's a portion of the article. Regenerative grazing systems create an interdependent web of on and off farm impacts, benefits, some of which are well proven and some of which need more research. So here's one. Increased forage production through pasture management leads to better soil structure and biology. So we're going to manage our pastures optimally. That leads to increased forage production. In other words, the forage that the animals are eating is going to grow better, faster through good pasture management, and that leads to better soil structure and biology. If you properly rotate your animals according to an adaptive management system, then that's going to be good for the soil health because of the grazing, because of the hoof impact, because of the manure, and because you're mimicking nature in that you're grazing for a short time and then letting it rest for a long time. And this is peer-reviewed research. So I have mixed feelings about the whole concept of peer review. Of course it has its place, but there's a whole lot of kind of culture war stuff going on these days where people that don't understand peer review are demanding peer-reviewed sources. But that's a whole other conversation. But we're giving sources here. So let's play that game because we have peer-reviewed research. So let's get in there. So the next, soil health improvements, in turn, lead to even better forage production. So you're managing your pastures, you're getting better forage production, which leads to better soil structure and biology. The better soil structure and biology in turn leads to even better forage production in a virtuous cycle, and that gives you improved animal health and nutrition, according to Payne and others in 1999. Next, we have improved soil function may also increase local resilience to extreme weather events through better water retention. So the local farms, the local economies are going to be in better shape, or they're probably, logically, they're going to be in better shape because of resilience to extreme weather events. Your soil is going to hold, healthy soil holds water better. That gets you through droughts. And the same good soil structure that gets you through drought also prevents flooding, because your soil has the capacity to absorb rainwater. There's only 3 things that can happen to rainwater, and the 2 main things that can happen to rainwater: it can either soak in the ground or it can become runoff. Healthy soil is going to be a sponge to soak in the rainwater. Gabe Brown got 13.6 inches of rain in 22 hours in 2009. Over a foot of rain in less than a day. Imagine that, over a foot of rain in less than a day. It all soaked in because his soil was ready for it. That's what we want to see happen. That's flood prevention, and that's drought prevention. Flood prevention and its resilience to drought. If we define drought as a lack of rain, your ground is going to hold more water and be more resilient to those periods when there's not as much water coming from the sky. You've got more water in the ground ready to nourish the plants. So all these things we're talking about: increased forage production, better soil structure and biology, soil health improvements, improved animal health and nutrition, improved soil function. All these things are a result of photosynthesis. So Alan Savory says, ultimately, the only wealth that can sustain any community, economy, or nation is derived from the photosynthetic process. Green plants growing on regenerating soil. Photosynthesis is vital. Photosynthesis is critical. Photosynthesis, according to Alan Savory, is the key to true wealth. And photosynthesis happens when you have plants and healthy soil. You have a variety of plants. Hopefully most of them are perennials, and you have healthy soil, and that takes maximum advantage of the photosynthesis. Let's read another part of the article. It says, regenerative grazing systems can produce significant ecosystem services on and off the farm, according to Franz Lubers et al., 2012. Ecosystem services that have value, monetary and otherwise, beyond the farm gate. In other words, it might help your farm, and it might help those outside your farm, such as increased water quality, better climate control and regulation. Unlike annual row crop systems and conventionally grazed pastures, regeneratively grazed pastures maintain dense, diverse stands of living plants which can prevent erosion. There's a benefit. Improve soil fertility. Reduce nutrient runoff. Do you want to keep your nutrients, or do you want them to go washing away? Reduce nutrient runoff due to increased water infiltration. That water is going to infiltrate or soak in, or it's going to run off. And these findings were from Park et al., 2017b. Next, perennial pasture also improves water quality. How's that happen? So perennial pasture, perennial is the opposite of annual. So they're talking about perennial pasture as opposed to annual. Yes, people do sow annuals and create pasture, but perennial pasture mainly as opposed to annual row crops. So that's going to improve your water quality. Perennials improve water quality because perennial means something that lasts more than 1 year, a plant that lives more than 1 year. There's going to be a permanence in the root structure, and even though at some level they're always changing, just like our bodies are always changing, but there's a sense of permanence that characterizes perennial pasture as opposed to always changing. Annual row crops or annual anything is always changing, especially if you're tilling. So perennial is a step in the right direction in many respects. You have permanence to the root structure underneath the ground. And that's going to improve water quality because there's less erosion. Okay, that's from Dens et al., 2002. And can increase soil, so perennial pasture also can increase soil water storage capacity. Soil is going to be able to store more water because healthy soil, by definition, stores more water. In higher infiltration rates can almost be a proxy for soil health because healthy soil is going to be good at infiltrating water and holding on to water. So perennial pasture is going to increase your soil water storage capacity through organic matter accrual. So organic matter is the magic. It's where the magic happens in the soil. All soil has minerals, sand, silt, and clay. Good soil has pore spaces and aggregate soil structure, and it's organic matter accrual means year by year your organic matter is increasing. Organic matter in poor soil is going to be 1 or 2%. Organic matter in good soil is going to be 5 to 8%. And so you want to go in that direction. Pre-European settlement, most of our soils had like 7 or 8% organic matter. Our practices have reduced the organic matter down to 1 or 2% in many cases. That 1 or 2% is not good soil. It does not have much aggregate soil structure. And so what we want organic matter accrual. We want the organic matter year by year to be increasing. And this can happen rapidly, or it can happen gradually. Either way is good. Increasing organic matter is good, whether it happens gradually or rapidly. Sadly, our organic matter is not accruing. It is not increasing under conventional farming methods. Next, on a global scale, regenerative grazing has potential for climate change mitigation through a range of mechanisms, including decreased reliance on fossil fuels and synthetic fertilizers, as well as increased carbon assimilation by perennial plant communities and sequestration in the soil. So some of us think there's a whole lot more to climate than just carbon. But even if you accept the focus on carbon, regenerative grazing means decreased reliance on fossil fuels. It means decreased reliance on synthetic fertilizers, which take a whole lot of fossil fuels to make. and increased carbon assimilation by perennial plant community. In other words, carbon is going to be drawn out of the air and into the soil. So 3 plain and obvious benefits of regenerative grazing: decreased reliance on fossil fuels, decreased reliance on synthetic fertilizers, and increased ability of the soil to absorb atmospheric carbon, because that's what plants do, especially when there's a diverse plant community, especially when the plant community is predominantly perennials, and especially if the plant community is sitting on top of healthy, high-functioning soil. And that's what a diverse plant community does for the soil. Plants create healthy soil. So here's this whole big thing. It's kind of a summary. This is from the same article. This is going to summarize the benefits of regenerative grazing. So it's like a clock. They've named 12 benefits here, from nutrient and soil retention, climate regulation, nutrient cycling, etc. And in the center here, you have some of these things are a definite and some of these things are a maybe. So the maybe, they have a question mark, and the definite, they have check marks. So let's start at the top. Regenerative grazing is better than the alternatives for nutrient and soil retention. That means there's going to be less erosion. Less erosion means you're keeping your soil. Less erosion means you're going to have less water pollution. And less erosion means, by definition, erosion means carbon is going to go into the atmosphere, because there's carbon in the soil until there isn't. And if your soil is being eroded and washing into the waterways, then that means that carbon is just going to oxidize and go into the atmosphere. Next, number 2, climate regulation. So climate regulation here, to me, doesn't just mean carbon sequestration. It means when you have water-rich ecosystems, when you have high-functioning ecosystems, then water flows through high-functioning ecosystems. Water is in the soil, water is in the plants, water is in the animals, water is in the fungi, water is in the bacteria, and water is in the water cycles: evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Water has a very high specific heat. We'll talk about that another time. But water holds heat. Places that have ecosystems that have water flowing through them are not going to suffer from the extreme cold or the extreme hot. Next, nutrient cycling. So every nutrient cycles: carbon cycles, nitrogen cycles, calcium cycles, molybdenum cycles, phosphorus cycles, potassium cycles. They cycle if you have a functioning ecosystem. Regenerative grazing is part of a functioning ecosystem. Your nitrogen is going to cycle from, plants are going to get nitrogen from the fungi and the bacteria, and that is much better nitrogen than nitrogen that you get out of a bag. Carbon is going to cycle. Carbon is in everything inside our living tissues. Proteins, fats, carbohydrates, carbon is in all of those. Nitrogen is a key element of proteins. So whenever you have proteins being synthesized and then utilized, you've got cycling of nitrogen. Next, habitat and biodiversity. So you're going to have biodiversity in your soil. You're going to have biodiversity in the plant matter. You're going to have biodiversity in the animal matter, the fungi, the bacteria. Habitat, regenerative grazing creates habitat. We'll Will Harris in Georgia has more bald eagles than any place else in Georgia, and he has regenerative grazing going on. Joel Salatin in Virginia has all 8 species of bumblebee that are native to his region. And you could go on. Regenerative grazing creates habitat. Next, flood regulation. That means the water is soaking into the ground and is not running off, so you're going to mitigate or reduce flooding. Next, we're at the bottom here, infiltration and water retention. More water is going to infiltrate into the ground and stay there. Next, rural and community health. So rural and community health is a question mark, and it's related to improved land access and generational transfer. Regenerative grazing means people are going to have multiple streams of income, and as compared with farms that just are all row crops or concentrated animal feeding operations. If you're growing row crops, that's pretty much 1 or 2 or 3 streams of income. If you have a concentrated animal feeding operation, that's 1 or 2 or 3 streams of income. But if you have regenerative grazing, that just goes hand in hand with farms that have not only have multiple forms of livestock, multiple crops, and multiple ways of making revenue from that, quite often selling farm products to the local economy. And so next, animal health and welfare. Compare regenerative grazing with concentrated animal feeding operations. The regenerative grazing is clearly better animal health and better animal welfare. And animals that are healthy and happier are going to make better food. I mean, you don't take lightly that you kill an animal to eat it, but that's another conversation, except to say that if you're asking me, plants are also sentient. Fungi are also sentient. Bacteria are sentient. So you can't say, in my view, you can't say that animals are sentient, plants are not. False distinction. I think they're all sentient. Next, last. Let's just say last. Number 11 here, or number 12, carbon sequestration. Clearly, regenerative grazing is going to sequester more carbon in the soil. If we wanted to do some if we wanted to do some serious carbon sequestration, then we would employ and deploy regenerative grazing widely and broadly and deeply and monumentally. If a lot of these, I've been a climate reporter for 4 years. I've done 356 episodes of the climate report. And in my humble opinion, most of the solutions to climate change are not solutions at all. Solar, wind, electric vehicles, battery storage, they just, when you look into it, they don't do very much. So that's a whole other conversation. I'm sorry if anybody has a problem with that. Conclusion. Despite endless claims to the contrary, livestock has an important role to play in regenerating the land, drawing down carbon, growing healthy food, raising animals humanely, and preventing the worst effects of climate change, such as flooding and drought. All this while restoring the land and local economies. So that's all. If you liked this video, please click like and subscribe. Thank you.